Thank you for joining me on the Bold Lines podcast. Today, we're going to be asking the question, what does love mean? Some of this might seem like semantics. Why in the world are we discussing love? Doesn't everybody know what that means? We know that love can mean a whole bunch of different things. Not all love is purely romantic. To give an example, I love my wife. I love my dog. I love my guitar. And I also love carbs. Do I love all of those things differently? I hope so. Love is inherently relational, and that will be the focus of this episode. We want to look at how does love interact with others? What does it mean about our connection to other people? The word love has grown massively in usage, but not so much in deep meaning. It's just exists out in the ether. We love this, we love that. And I'm absolutely guilty of using the word love flippantly. I love this, I love that. 100%. Some of that's on me, but the focus of today's episode is to speak about love in a therapeutic environment. What does it mean to care for someone else? So let's start this off. What is love? If any of you are old enough, I hope that you took that pause there with a smile. I'd like to thank Hadaway for his wonderful dance number that puts in your head the immediate answer to the question, what is love? Anyway, in therapy, I hear a lot of people saying they love one thing, they love another, or they love someone. But rarely is there ever a real breakdown of what that means. Without a true definition, we really struggle. I'm going to start us off with the 8 different types of love from the Greeks. The first of these 8 types is eros. It's sexual passion. The second is philia, or philia, however you want to pronounce it. Deep friendship. Ludus, playful love. Agape, love for everyone. Pragma, long-standing love. Philautia, love of self. Storge, family love. And mania, obsessive love. Is this a completely exhaustive list? No. But all of the things that we call love can be broken down into these 8 different types of love. Do we love people sexually? I would say nowadays we would go that direction. Do we say we love friends? Yes, the city of Philadelphia is the city of brotherly love. Do we love people in a playful manner? Yeah, you see that a lot with young couples or people poking fun at one another. Agape, one of the more encompassing forms of love, is this overarching engagement with people as a whole, not just a simple aspect of them. We also love people in a long-standing, steadfast way. We think of the older couple with the rocking chairs on the front porch for this long-standing love. In some ways, we need to learn to love ourselves. There's a little asterisk there. Sometimes we could do that too much in modern society. We also love our family, our parents, our siblings, our children. That means something different. And then the last one, mania. Do we love people obsessively? Well, if you're familiar with the word mania, it's in psychological diagnoses. So that one can get a little problematic. But let me break down what I mean by love in a therapeutic context. So here's the setup. I'm going to give you some insight. We're going to break some of this down, and then I'm going to give some recurring examples to help make some sense. So let's say I have a client in front of me, and they say that, well, my parents, they really loved me. And I follow up with, okay, what does love mean? When they say that they loved you, tell me about what that looks like. The first category is what someone means as love. This is a rather subjective thing. It's more focused on how our personal definition impacts other people. It can also be deep or rather shallow, but is usually defined by our actions. And I will say, and this is the important part of this section of what we mean as love, it's not necessarily defined by everything that someone can offer. If someone says, well, I love you, sometimes it's just a bid for connection. It doesn't involve any great sacrifice or meaning. A lot of times when clients come in and say, well, my parents loved me, and I ask them what they mean, and they said, well, they bought me shoes. Okay. Did they call that love? Sure. Could it be an aspect of a greater part of love? Absolutely. But sometimes when people use the word love, it isn't just small. Sometimes it's hateful, angry, or toxic. What happens if someone shuts you out, is volatile, and calls that love? Is it love? They're certainly using the word, and that's where we would find this first category. When someone says they love you, they might just mean it in a way that makes sense to them, not in any other reasonable, objective way. So here's our two examples. These two will carry on into our other categories, so keep them in mind. The first of these two examples is, I love my children by providing for them. This statement in itself seems nice, but it doesn't provide any level of emotional engagement. It's just a statement of fact. I love them because I do this thing. Okay, that's a thing that you do, but it seems that love's a little obscure here. To the second one, I love my spouse by spending time with them. Is spending time with someone a loving gesture? Sure, absolutely. But it would be inadequate to say, I love them by doing this thing that they like. It could be an aspect of caring about them, but it would be too reductive to say that that's really what love is. The second category, after what someone just means is love in the best way they know how. Now, this is different from the first category. In the first category, we've just slapped a label on something. We said, oh, well, it's loving. Yeah, that's love, right? This category requires effort and engagement. Specifically, it involves sacrifice. If you love someone the best way you know how, you will give an immense amount of effort. Within the framework you can understand, you will work really, really hard. When someone comes in and talks about their parents loving them, in some ways, their parents will say, yes, I did everything I knew how to do. And that's incredibly admirable. Most of the time, parents do things to the greatest degree they knew was possible. It can often be connected to what this parent would have personally preferred or needed in their own lives. Let's say a parent grew up in a home that was emotionally devoid and distant. And then when they had their own children, that became a huge priority. And even so much so that they would lose sleep or sacrifice a job or whatever they would give up along the way to be emotionally present. That would be loving someone in the best way you know how. When we ask people, did you love your kids? And they say, yes, I did everything I could. This speaks to the fact that they would not be able to come up with something different on their own. They racked their brains and were able to say, this is the best I got. So let's go to these two examples and see how it changes. To give a reminder, the first section said, I love my children by providing for them. Now, as we move into loving someone the best way they know how, it changes into, I love my children by providing everything I can for whatever they need. You can hear in this statement that there's effort, there's engagement, someone's paying attention. They are giving of themselves. They are working hard for a specific outcome, something that they see as beneficial. The second one, to go back and listen again, the giving love is, I love my partner by spending time with them. And loving someone the best way they know how, I love my partner by giving up things I don't need to be with them whenever they need me. This is, again, way more intentional. It's a thought process that people think through. This person could use something from me. From my point of view, this is the best thing I can offer them. Now, to the third category, and I think this one is the most important, but also the most complicated. Loving someone in the way that they need. Now, knowing what someone needs is an incredibly difficult task. In order to do so, you have to be thoroughly engaged in empathy and self-reflection. You cannot just look at someone and say, well, I know you and I know what you need. Here you go. Here's your script. Simply not how it works. Loving someone in the way that they need, make sure that you're not enabling them or neglecting them. This is finding that balance. When unhealthy behaviors persist, you're able to step away. It can be loving to walk away. It also can be loving to lean in when the person doesn't quote unquote deserve it, because love in this category is way more complicated. In order to love someone in the way that they need, you have to continue to learn yourself and consider greater context. As a parent, I could sit here and imagine all of the ways that I think I could love my children. But what happens if they come upon something I've never heard of before? If I only use my own lens, I'm going to lack what they need. So I have to continue to be able to learn, not just about them, but about myself, and consider the whole world. It wouldn't be very loving of me to tell my kid, well, you're going to be anxious today, so sure, have extra sugar and no protein. It'll be fine because I love you. That's not loving someone in the way that they need. That's just showing love in a way that makes sense to me. To truly love someone in the way that they need requires you to step outside of yourself and become uncomfortable. Obviously, in a healthy way, you don't become uncomfortable just for the sake of it. But you have to be willing to sacrifice some of what you feel to help someone else grow. The examples, the first one is, I love my children by providing the time and resources needed for them to be the best version of themselves. See, this is a little bit different than our previous category, because it's not just that I give up of myself. It's I'm paying attention and I'm attuned to the needs of my children. Let's say, for instance, that I have children that are very invested in sports. I might love them the best way that I know how by providing them an art education. Is that what they need? No, but it's the best that I think I could do. And see, there's the difference. This is where we start to see discord in therapy. This is where a lot of clients are able to step back and say, I can acknowledge that my parents did the best that they could within their own minds. That doesn't mean they gave me what I needed. From this realization, clients can go a whole bunch of different directions. Do they blame their parents for lack of work? Do they accept the places that they've been and recognize that their parents likely did a fantastic job and there were some things they slacked on? Do they provide grace in that way? When you can sit back and reflect and engage in this dynamic, all of a sudden love is referential. It's engaging. It's something that is openly spoken about. To the second example, I love my partner by learning more about them every day, becoming closer with their heart through work and sacrifice. See, this is very, very, very invested. You can't love someone in the way that they need if you're not paying attention. And like ourselves, our partners and our spouses have different thoughts every day. If you're going to love someone in the way that they need, you have to pay attention. You can't just sit back and you can't work off a script. So what does all of this have to do with therapy? I gave some sort of context. I said, well, this is what it looks like when clients come to me and talk about love. How does this work? A lot of times people get this framework, these 3 different ways to love people, and they realize that what they initially thought was truly caring and loving someone wasn't. They thought they were loving their spouse or their partner well, only to realize they were doing the best that they could without actually asking the other person. They weren't trying to be manipulative, they just weren't being empathetic. For some people, they come to realize that their definition of love is something someone else constructed for their own benefit. I've had many clients come in and say, well, they told me they loved me. And when we break it down, it's a simple emotional and manipulative experience. It has nothing to do with sacrifice. It has nothing to do with empathy. It's just a convenient word. What is and isn't love then? How do we see this in a therapeutic context and even in a therapeutic relationship? It is not loving to see someone about to get hit by a train and say absolutely nothing. Here's one of my gripes with modern quote unquote therapy. If you as a therapist are seeing your client about to get hit by a train and you say, well, whatever makes you happy, you're not doing a great job. We don't dictate people's lives and we don't understand every aspect of them. But there's a difference between being inconvenienced in learning and being hit by a train. Likewise, if you have someone in your life who you see is about to get hit by a train, whether that's because of the consequences of their own actions or because they're not paying attention, it's not loving to sit back and watch them get hit and be called nice. It is also not loving to defer relevant problems or to overengage in situations that you're not a part of. It's not loving to say, well, that's a you problem. It's also not loving to insert yourself into things that have nothing to do with you. Be fair, that's most of the social media discourse or the virtue signaling. None of that is love. You make no impact. You're not involved in anything. You're just calling it love because it makes you feel better. One crucial part of love, it's not always kind. It's not always loving to be nice and smiling with someone. Sometimes people need to be emotionally or sometimes physically shaken. If you're kind all of the time, you're not loving because you're not telling anybody any way to get better. You're simply affirming and not making waves. Of course, affirming is a good thing, but if you're never quote unquote mean or harsh, you haven't provided anyone anything except a pillow. Love is intentionally and willingly sacrificing yourself for those around you. Obviously, this is limited. I love my family different than I love my community. I will pick my family over my community 7 days a week, or as the Beastie Boys say, 8 days a week. I'll do it every time. But in the ways that are healthy, meaningful, engaging, and reciprocal, sure, sacrifice myself for my community as long as I honor my needs, what my family needs from me. Love is also honoring what you need. If you've ever paid attention at the beginning of a flight, when the flight attendants are up at the front and they give the safety presentation, the part where most people have their headphones in and they're looking down on a phone, getting some last messages away. There's a very stereotypical few lines in it. In case of the loss of cabin pressure, be sure to put the mask on yourself before assisting others. You cannot be loving if you're not paying attention to yourself, because the energy will leave somewhere. And if you're not full, you cannot love others well, because it will be motions. It will be things that you will lose at the expense of those who really matter. Love is defined outside of what you are feeling in the moment. This is a big one. You should consider all things, not just the temporary. But loving someone isn't just what you feel. Just because something feels positive or open or engaging doesn't mean it's love. Love is sacrifice. Love creates meaning through engagement. So what does love mean? Not just you. If you want to love someone well, you have to move away from just slapping the word love. If you want to love someone well, you have to move away from just slapping the label there. Well, this is loving. I love him. I love her. I love this. It's not really love. Especially don't use this in relationships. Well, I'm loving you by doing this, aren't I? Or no, they loved me. Maybe that's just a label. It's admirable to love someone in the best way you know how. I can't fault people necessarily for working really, really hard. You can't be too terribly upset with someone sacrificing their lives for what they thought was good. We can argue with outcome, but there at least is some honor in that. If you want to love someone well, you have to know what they need and provide it. You cannot just say what is nice. You cannot just make them smile. Sometimes they might dislike you, disagree with you. Sometimes they might find such great discord that they distance themselves from you. It's not loving to lose a part of yourself, to go back on values and morals and what is right, simply to keep people close by. It's enabling. If you say you love someone, please know the kind of love that you mean. And if you're someone who has listened all the way to the end of this episode, consider the love that you experienced. Consider the love that you give other people. How deep is it? How meaningful is it? How engaged is it? Make some changes if need be, or recognize that sometimes people do the best they can, and even if you didn't get what you needed, a lot is still really good. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you got something useful out of this episode today. Love is a buzzword nowadays. It's one of the few positive ones we have left. If you found this episode useful, I hope that you follow the podcast so you can get weekly downloads, share it with someone who might find it useful. And if you feel so inclined, leave something in the tip jar to help pay for the production of this podcast. You can also submit a question in the links in the description of this podcast episode. Thank you so much. Have a great day.